Hello, listeners. Mallory Wilsey here, Chief Producer of the Enrollify Network, and I want to take just a quick moment to tell you about another show on our podcast network designed specifically for all the education technology enthusiasts out there. The Higher Ed Geek podcast is a deep dive into the world of educational technology and its transformative impact on the student experience. Geek out each week with host Dustin Ramsdell. His conversations are a mix of engaging storytelling, expert analysis, and a genuine passion for all things higher ed and tech. Whether you're an educator or an administrator or just someone passionate about the intersection of technology and education, this podcast promises to deliver content that's both enlightening and entertaining. You can subscribe to the show by visiting podcast.enrollify.org or by searching the Higher Ed Geek wherever you get your podcasts.
But, again, on the institution side, if you are over website analytics, you want to make sure that your, marketing team or that your admissions team can also access that website data if they need to understand how their recruits are moving through the website and what they're doing. They not just need access to that, but they also likely need training on how to read that data, how to consume it properly, and make informed decisions on what they find.
Yeah, it needs to be actionable. It's great to have findings and say, oh, that's interesting. But if you're not going to use it to improve your service or improve the lives of your staff or your students, then it's not really worth it, right? We need to use this data to make a difference and to make positive changes.
Welcome to the EduData Podcast, a podcast that serves as your weekly guide to the data driving higher education. We are your hosts. I'm Jamie Boggs.
And I'm Timothy Davis. Join us every Friday for weekly breakdowns of the most important data, trends, and topics in higher education.
The EduData Podcast is a part of the Enrollify Network, a robust collection of podcasts designed to help higher education professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal favorites linked in the show notes below.
Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered, all-in-one student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.
All right. Well, welcome back to another episode of the EduData Podcast. I'm Timothy Davis here, as always, with Jamie Boggs. Hey, Jamie.
Hey, Timothy. How you doing?
Good. In that last episode, we were talking about the Northern Lights, and we're not going to sidebar that long again today. So let's
right
get
to the meat and potatoes.
Absolutely. No silly skylights for us. Right into today's topic. Today, we wanted to bring you to the best practices for using post-secondary outcomes data, which is a set of best practices for accomplishing that. We wanted to just cover some of those best practices because they align with a lot of things that we've said on this podcast before. And just generally wanted to bring this body of work to you just so you're aware of it, as it could be potentially helpful to what you do as a data practitioner day to day or even as an admissions professional. This best practices set is assembled by QIP, which is the Quality Information Partners. It is a policy group that works with state and local education policymakers, as well as educational institutions and a bunch of other constituents across the public and private sector. But basically, their core services are for developing audience-appropriate messaging for education data, for sort of building consensus and creating community amongst data professionals in the industry, and then obviously for developing these sort of best practices and guidelines for how certain initiatives should be completed. But I wanted to just quickly read the 5 best practices, and then maybe, Jamie, you and I can talk about some of the ones that stick out to us. So, as I said, like these best practices, as they're outlined here, were intended for using post-secondary outcomes data. That's the use case that they are sort of articulated for, and we'll see some of that in how they're phrased. But these best practices, I think, are also really relevant to just data practitioners as a whole in the higher education industry. So if you're working with data in education, using these best practices, I think will get you a long way. So let me just go ahead and read these off really quick, and then we can talk about them a little bit, Jamie. The first one is to promote a responsible data sharing culture. The second, to connect data from multiple sources. The third, develop data resources and tools. The fourth, provide ongoing and adaptive support. And the fifth, to establish communities of practice. There's one that certainly stuck out to me, but are there any in that list, just off the cuff, Jamie, that stick out to you?
Well, the first thing that came to mind is I feel like these are topics of our first 5 or 6 episodes of EduData, talking about, how to make sure you're getting the most out of data on your campus, whether that's the resources, a data sharing model or warehouse or data lake, and then how to make sure you're accounting for all the different sources. I think we have covered a lot of this, so I think that just reinforces the importance of what's on here. Also, really interested just in the overall topic of outcomes and what we deem as the outcomes, as you and I kind of talked about off the air before. But yeah, really interested in that piece of it. And then the communities of practice. I think that's something we haven't really gotten to yet, which I think is kind of what we're trying to shoot for here. But
yeah, in a way, we're kind of our own community of practice, or hoping to be, as we kind of talk about these different topics and just try to promote data literacy and data awareness across the higher education sector and amongst admissions and marketing professionals. So hopefully that's in a way what we're doing here. Of course, much more informally than this. But yeah, so circling back, I wanted to touch first on connecting data from multiple sources. I feel like we've said that exact term across several episodes. But here they kind of they say it like this. In this context, we're talking about dealing with agencies, dealing with institutions in both K-12 and in higher ed. So here they say, states with longitudinal data systems can analyze data collections across education levels in one consolidated system. Again, there's that idea, consolidated system. We want to get the data that we're using, whether we're using that for evaluating post-secondary outcomes or whether we're using that to evaluate our institution's performance at whatever metrics that we're shooting for, whether that's our marketing goals or our enrollment goals or our outcomes goals, right? We want to be able to do that from a consolidated system. And what they reference here is that this connects students at the K-12 level to post-secondary data, and that can show what aspects of their education may have contributed to certain post-secondary outcomes, right? So again, in that context, talking about seeing the entire life cycle of a student and trying to point out what were the difference makers in their outcome journey. But again, trying to tie this back into marketing and enrollment, same concept, right? We want to look at the entire student life cycle. We want to be able to see what interactions with the university did they have maybe early on in their recruitment journey, right? As they, did they see the view book or did they see the website? And what pages on the website? Who did they talk to? What factors here contribute to their likelihood to enroll? What factors, even there in the marketing funnel, contribute to their likelihood to persist and to graduate? So being able to do that requires a consolidated system, requires centralization of data. Is that kind of what you were picking up there as well, Jamie, or did you have other thoughts?
Yeah, I think it goes back to what we talked about last week with the ROI study. They took data from so many different sources and put it together in a way that not a lot of other people have. And that's why the findings were so rich and so deep, I think, because they were taking that different data. And, we measure outcomes through our CRM with, we look at application completed, becomes a prospect, enrolls, and then I think most marketing professionals meet their enrollment goals, and then they're like, oh yeah, cool, I'm done with that group. But I agree with you. I think we need to look forward to not only are we recruiting the students that are likely to enroll, but that are likely to graduate. And even after that, likely to give back after you have all that alumni data. But all that data lives in different places. So you have to be willing to share and find a way to share and join that data that's going to make it useful and not just be pretty.
Hey, it's Mallory. Exciting news. I'm hosting the Engage Summit in Raleigh on June 25th and 26th, and I'd love to meet you there. Together, we'll dive into the mind of the modern student. what fires them up, how they interact, and what they expect in today's digital age, and how tools like AI help put them in the driver's seat of their education. We have some terrific speakers, including our closing keynote, New York Times bestselling author Jeff Selingo. Sessions will dig into practical ideas and innovative strategies to get your team more student centered and ready to adopt AI. And many of your favorite Enrollify hosts are presenting too, like Jamie Hunt, Jenny Lee Fowler, and Brian Gross. Use the discount code Enrollify50 for an extra $50 off your registration. Learn more and register at engage.element451.com. We can't wait to see you there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we're talking about, removing silos,
Yeah.
connecting data, and making data available to any stakeholder across the organization or across the partnership that needs to make decisions or needs the visibility to understand what's happening in the organization. So yeah, really helpful recommendation there. The two that I want to transition us to are developing data resources and tools, and then providing ongoing and adaptive support. And, if you're working in data, I know a lot of folks on like the website end are really interested in dashboarding and, bringing data sets into really consumable visualizations and finding the best ways to do that. But that's kind of what we're talking about when we talk about data resources and tools, right? Maybe that's dashboards that consumers have access to, or reports that come out at, a yearly or a quarterly cadence or a semester cadence, whatever that is. And making those available to the people who need them. But the other side to that coin, which is listed here, is the providing ongoing and adaptive support, right? And so in the context of this outcomes data, it's talking about, making sure that the data tools and resources that are available are accessible, right, to the people who need to consume them, but also that they have training on how to use those reports, right? So maybe that's K-12 consumers, or maybe that's policy consumers in the context of these best practices. But, again, on the institution side, if you are over website analytics, you want to make sure that your, marketing team or that your admissions team can also access that website data if they need to understand how their recruits are moving through the website and what they're doing. And they not just need access to that, but they also likely need training on how to read that data, how to consume it properly, and make informed decisions on what they find.
Yeah, it needs to be actionable. It's great to have findings and say, "Oh, that's interesting," but if you're not going to use it to improve your service or improve the lives of your staff or your students, then it's not really worth it, right? We need to use this data to make a difference and to make positive changes. And I think this is episode 25 or something like that of the EduData podcast. And Timothy, things have changed in terms of resources and support, even since we started this. Like just a couple weeks ago, ChatGPT now is going multimodal, and you can just talk to it now or show it pictures, and it's going to come up. Like, things are changing so quickly that connecting the data from multiple sources is easier, but staying up to date and providing the support needed to take advantage of those sources and resources is, becoming increasingly challenging if you're trying to keep up with the newest stuff.
Absolutely. And we've talked about the AI use case for kind of both of those topics, developing data resources and providing ongoing and adaptive support. We think at least that AI can fit both of those use cases. The AI can be the data resource, as it can help you answer the questions that you have about your data, right? So using an LLM like ChatGPT to be able to query over data, to be able to produce visualizations for data, to be able to explain visualizations for data. Those are the two that really meet those criteria, right? And I think that's going to be a really excellent use case for AI in the higher ed context, is just being able to access and use our data.
Absolutely. And I think revisiting the beginning of this whole conversation and outcomes, I think we need to take a step back from that and look at what are our outcomes, what are our milestones, and are those what they should be? Should they be changing as we look? Is it Is it as important if somebody completes an application? I mean, obviously they have to at some point, but is it as it used to be with all the Common App and with other ways to get connected? Is it as important to continue to send? We measure open rates and click rates on emails. Is that as important if they don't click it anymore? Or are we using QR codes now in the emails that they're using? Do clicks not even matter? So what outcomes are we measuring that are going to be actionable? Are they outdated, or are there new outcomes we can look at? Is it how often the Chat GPT was accessed, or our chat bot was accessed, or our assistant was accessed? And I don't think we're measuring those things universally as we should. We surface those and highlight them in Element 451 in our platform, but like you said, being able to train and understand what that means and what it means for my job and my school is a next step.
I love how you're kind of framing this. Like, of course, these best practices, as we've said, and I'll reiterate here again ad nauseum. These best practices were formulated, in the context in QIP's context for states and policymakers and educational institutions to evaluate post-secondary outcomes. But I love that you're sort of framing the concept of a post-secondary outcome in the same way as we would frame like a conversion for a funnel path. And in a lot of ways they really are. And when you do that, then you can maybe more clearly define your data model that's going to do that. Like in the context of predicting things, right? You typically have a column of your data set that is your target, right? And so maybe your target is what? Chatbot conversation, or RFI form submission, or got a job versus did not get a job, or got a job that exceeds the U.S. median average income, or whatever your outcome is. And then that column is just like a 1 or a 0, right? Did they do this or did they not? Is that our outcome? Is that our conversion? And then from there, right, everything preceding that column in the data set can be used as a factor that influences that potentially influenced the conversion, right? So basically trying to like create a causal relationship through machine learning. Right. And that's effectively how predictive data sets work. And now we're talking about predictive modeling. But I think that it is really helpful to think about post-secondary outcomes, to think about marketing outcomes, to think about admissions outcomes, to think about internal outcomes, whether that's persistence or graduation, as conversions in and of themselves. I think from the perspective of a data professional, no matter where you land or where you work and what conversion maybe it is that you're after, those are all conversions. Those are all outcomes that we can measure against.
And not only are those machine learning models predicting outcomes for future prospects or what have you, but it's also telling you the factors that are most important. So it may come back and say, if we can get them on campus for that campus tour, they're locked in. So that's the most important factor that leads to admission or enrollment. So it spits out the feature importance of what things are making the biggest difference in this outcome, which is something that we just guess at a lot of the time.
Many a director of admissions circa 2008 would love to have a predictive model that says, it's the campus tour, baby.
Yep.
Get them on campus and they'll just stay. They won't even actually leave the tour. They'll just move in at the same time.
We're just going to take a bus to all these schools and bring them back.
Bring them back.
Tour. Let's get them here. And it's locked in. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I hope our listeners think about outcomes in these ways and frame their data operations around kind of ensuring we're incorporating these best practices.
Absolutely. Well, we'll of course link to this resource in our show notes so you can have a look at what QIP is offering. And maybe that's a sector that you're interested in. Maybe that's a community that you want to contribute to. So you can have access to that there. But we'll go ahead and wrap it up for today. Thanks again for joining us. Hope you have a great rest of your day. See you in the next episode.
The EduData podcast is part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like the other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month. We've got a plethora of marketing enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional.
Our shows help higher ed marketers and admissions professionals find their next big idea and feature a selection of the industry's best as your hosts. Learn from Jamie Hunt, Artis Cadu, Dustin Ramsdale, Jeremy Tiers, and so many of your other favorite leaders in higher ed. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.